What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of 10X Recruiting, brought to you by MetaView. Sile, what's up, man? It's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
All right. So today we had Andy Pittman on, who is the VP of Talent at ShipBob. Sile, you listened to the episode. What were your takeaways?
So big takeaways. Andy's super buttoned up. Super impressive guy for sure. Well, I've had a couple of things so far on this series about different ways of thinking about quality of hire. And I thought it was really cool when you look at things on a long enough timescale, which I think that was probably one thing that struck me about Andy in general. It's like sort of actually setting up structures that scale and lead towards high performance consistently over time, as opposed to like super flashy, spiky things. And he talks about measuring their internal mobility. I'm not even sure he talked about it specifically in relation to quality of hire, but it just struck me as like that is a quality of hire metric, actually. In reality, that's like a 1 year, 2 year delayed quality of hire metric. Is, do you move these people into more senior roles over time? And, that should be a reflection, not of just, that individual, but also the recruiting team. And so I think that's pretty cool to have like these actual metrics around expectation, around internal mobility. But I'd say my biggest takeaway was some of the sort of things that seem fluffy about recruiting. Like we say internally, like bad hiring can ruin lives, right? And it sounds a little bit over the top. Anyway, the way he talks about it is a more positive way, which is you're hiring people and they want a better life. So that's what he thinks about from an employer brand perspective, is how do we help this person understand that they will have literally a better life when they join this company? So I just think that sort of framing around thinking about recruiting as essentially selling candidates a better life is very powerful, and obviously something to be really proud of being part of as well, which is cool.
I love that. So my two takeaways were, number one, they require a 24-hour SLA for interview feedback. And it made me remember my time at DoorDash, because we didn't have an SLA, but there was an expectation. And when people violated the expectation, the hiring manager would be like, what is going on here? Like, what is taking you so long? And this is obviously like now in the era of MetaView, it's super easy to be able to submit that. Like, there's really no reason not to, other than like you haven't spent the 10 to 15 minutes required being like, do we want to make a hire recommendation here or not? So I actually love that as just a way to like make sure that things keep moving. It doesn't mean that we're going to extend an offer, but it does mean we will actually have more information to figure out next steps. Yeah, social pressure takes effect. All right, so the second one for me was around quality of hire. And so at ShipBob, Andy instituted this question. So 90 days after a new hire starts, they send a question to the hiring manager that says, given all the information that we know right now about this person, if you could go back and do it again, would you hire this person again? I think that this is like a master stroke of genius, because if you think about it, like, okay, so 90 days in, right? I get this question. If my answer is yes, like, great, awesome. Then a month goes by and now all of a sudden I'm like, hey, this person isn't performing well. Like, hold on, we just asked you what was going on here. What changed in the last 30 days? So I love that aspect of it. Then it's like, if the answer is no, right? You keep doing this time after time after time again with every single hire. It starts to reinforce, everybody knows, all hiring managers knows the questions is coming, right? And so I actually think like now, if it's been instituted for 12 to 18 months and you're waiting until that 90-day mark and you're like, oh, I actually wouldn't, people are gonna be like, well, why haven't you been talking about it? What's going on here with that? I've been thinking about the beauty of these simple questions to institute in the hiring process. And now, as Andy's geniusly bringing up into the employee experience, you ask these very simple, powerful questions that get to the root of the thing. And they serve as like a backstop to make sure that we're actually like doing the things that we want to be doing inside of the company. I love this episode. I think Andy is like one of those people who's been flying under the radar for a little bit, and that is no longer the case anymore. There's a ton of learnings in this one, so you guys are going to love it. So here is my episode with Andy Pittman from ShipBob. Hope you guys enjoy it. This is 10X Recruiting, a podcast from MetaView. Let's get after it. All right, Andy, what's up? I'm so happy you're here. Welcome to the show.
Nolan, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Okay, so you're at ShipBob right now. Can you give the audience like 2 minutes on your background, including your current role?
Yeah, so if you look me up on LinkedIn, you're probably like, what the hell is this guy been doing? For the past 20 years, you're going to see a grass-fed beef jerky business. You're going to see a Christmas light installation business on there, which still exists today. I have to shout that one out. But no, over the past 12 years, I've found myself in this early to mid-stage startup world. So coming into these companies that have great product market fit, are highly like mission driven, and helping them scale to be a sustainable and hopefully generational business. So Pin Drop was my second startup. I was the 12th employee there. They're doing amazing work in voice authentication and fraud prevention and deep fake prevention, which is super relevant right now. They're actually like getting into all of the fraud that we're seeing in interviews.
I met their chief people officer recently, by the way, who's like
really?
they're like building a product to solve this problem. Interestingly enough,
I saw. I haven't spoken with her or anyone over there, but I've seen like posts about it, and I was like, yes, somebody's trying to solve that. It's wild. And then Mailchimp after Pin Drop. So was there for about 6 years, leading what we call talent strategy, which is a similar role to ShipBob, but how we think about talent acquisition, talent attraction, organizational effectiveness, learning and development, the whole gambit of how do we bring the right people on board and then set them up for success. So I've been at ShipBob for, gosh, almost 4 years at this point. Might be why I have like lines on my forehead and like bags under my eyes. But we're the default solution for emerging e-commerce brands when it comes to supply chain. So if you're building a Rise Coffee or an Athletic Greens or any brand that's seeing a lot of market traction, you need a supply chain partner that can help you with your inventory and your shipping to your consumers, as well as like your B2B shipping. And we've become that default solution for them. So at ShipBob, I lead talent acquisition, talent attraction, so think employer branding and storytelling, and what I refer to as talent activation, which is how do we successfully bring the people that are investing in a portion of their career with us into the organization to set them up for success, try and limit the surprises, try and reduce the anxiety that's inevitably going to happen when someone starts a new role, and get them to perform at a high level from the onset.
Got it. All right. We're going to get into all that stuff. I do actually want to start with recruiting brand, because the longer I've been in the game, the more I realize like how important it is. And so how are you thinking about solving that problem at ShipBob?
I think it's a problem that is going to be very difficult to solve. But one of my first principles is the best talent, the best people like in the world are not going to respond to a now hiring sign. Like the market down, the market down the street from my house, which I go to like 5 times a week because we're fully remote to go get lunch, has a now hiring sign up front, and that's great for them. But if you are if you're a tech company or any company, you can't have the expectation that great people are going to want to come to you just by putting a now hiring sign out on LinkedIn or on Indeed or on any of these platforms. That's not going to motivate the great people to come to your organization, because the best people, they don't want another job. There's plenty of jobs out there. I know that may not like feel the way right now, but the best people have plenty of options. They want a better life. So when I think about like employer branding and positioning the company, and we can get into this, it's first identifying who it is that we're actually trying to attract, and how do we position ourselves to help them realize whether or not, and if it's or not, that's okay as well, but whether or not ShipBob is the type of place that can give them a better life, because we can't give a better life to everybody.
Interesting. Okay. So when you say like that's a couple of things I deeply agree with. One is like the best talent has plenty of options, and typically they're like not actively looking, right? Like, like for many people I know, they're buried in work. They got kids, they got families, they got all this other shit. Like they're not just like going outbound. And typically like that talent is actually getting pinged a bunch. So okay, so for ShipBob, I have no idea who you are, right? Like you guys like ping me. Like how do you start to engage me? How do I start to like understand who you are and if it is going to bring me a better life?
Well, don't take this the wrong way, Nolan. You are not our target market.
You guys probably dodged a bullet that way, but that's fine.
And candidly, like our brand is something that we are continuously working on. But I think it makes sense maybe to go back to this notion of your company can't be right for everybody. It can't be right for all the best talent in the world. You have to go a couple layers deeper than that. So, for example, somebody that was amazing at Meta or amazing at Google or amazing at Amazon is not necessarily going to be amazing in our environment. Like every company has its own unique culture, its unique ecosystem, its unique operating models, its leadership styles, like all of these things. So for me, it's always about starting out with who you are as an organization and like owning that, not necessarily like trying to change it, but figure it out like who you are now as well as who you are wanting to be, and start positioning yourself to who you want to be. Have you ever heard of the strategy cascade framework? It's usually something I like to start with.
No, tell me about it.
So there's this really great book. I've read it a couple of times. It's called Playing to Win. It's by A.G. Lafley. He was the former CEO of Procter and Gamble, and it's a super interesting read. But basically, it's a framework for setting your strategy from the highest level. So starting with, what is your purpose? What is our winning aspiration? All the way down to like what management systems are required to deliver on this purpose. And there's steps in between this cascade. And now, typically, this sort of framework is used to develop like an organizational strategy, right? Like we're building a company, we're launching a new product into a new segment, whatever it is. But I've used it at MailChimp and I've used it at PinDrop. It is unbelievably relevant to developing like a talent strategy as well. So after you, I want to be clear on this, work with your executive team and your founders on what is our winning aspiration. So for like me as a head of talent or whatever, I'm going to come in with a point of view on what I think it is, but you have to get the buy-in on putting pen to paper on what your winning aspiration for the, from a talent perspective is with your founders and with your executives. You move down into, well, where will we play? Where are we going to compete to get to this this winning aspiration? And that's where your brand comes in, like really identifying what is the type of talent that we need. And I'm not talking about, skills necessarily. I'm not talking about other companies that people have worked for, like really getting to the root of like the behaviors, the behavioral competencies, the motivations of the individuals to dial into where is it we want to compete and how do we message to those folks.
Interesting. So when you think about like, how did you do it at ShipBob? So you come in and you like meet with the founders exec team, and what's the process of getting them aligned? Because I think actually where people go wrong with this is, to your point, everyone comes in with their own set of beliefs, their own things that have worked in the past, and then they try and like bring that playbook in, and it's like a total disaster. And it's a disaster because the playbook isn't aligned with what the founders want. And so how do you actually like, what is the process for you to like dissect what's in the founder's brain? Because that's always actually I think an area where I have struggled. Is like, okay, you're saying a lot of things, but like, what are the things that actually matter as it relates to recruiting and bringing in the talent we want?
Yeah, so you're exactly right, Nolan. I every time I've done this, and I've been fortunate for the past two companies to work with two co-founders. And what I've found almost every time is each co-founder has a different point of view on this. And then when you get to the one-on-one conversations, and that's how I always start, is with one-on-one conversations with executives and founders to get their perspective. You read that back, like it is almost like you are doing a design thinking exercise when developing a product and you're talking to customers. You don't talk to all your customers at once. Really go to like your major customers and talk to them one-on-one. And you consolidate that and you showcase the differences and like the different points of view. But what I really like to do outside of the leadership level is talk to our high performers. So in these conversations, just simply ask like, hey, Nolan, who on your team, if they were to leave in the next 6 months, would be absolutely catastrophic to our business? Who are the people that are just like absolutely crushing it? And you have that same conversation with them as well. And the two questions that I like to ask these individuals is super simple. Why do you work at ShipBob? Got a lot of options out there. Like why the hell are you here? And what is it about our environment that motivates you to perform at a high level? And that does a couple of things. Like one, it makes the people feel really good. They're being recognized as somebody that has influence in the organization. They're being seen as a high performer. They know that the senior executives are talking about them and they're seen. But two, that really gets to the root of what your actual true value proposition is as a company. So doing that roadshow, asking those two questions, typically depends on the size and the scale of the company, but it could be 50 to 100 people. And there's never a bad time to do this exercise either. But you aggregate that information and that gives you your employer value proposition.
Yeah, because you just come back to the founders and say, this is what the best people said. And for them, it's like, yeah, there might be some things on the margins there that they tinker with. But for the most part, like when the top performers speak, that's when their ears are most open to listen.
And I've had occurrences where the founders don't agree. I'm sure you'd be shocked. You'd be shocked to hear that, right? Like,
yeah, right.
And that's kind of where some like negotiation comes in, and like some really like understanding, because what the founders want is obviously critically important. It's their company. It's their big vision. But every time I've done this exercise, it always kind of clicks light bulbs, like with the founders of like, I didn't know that, or I didn't know that's like how people felt, or I thought they were motivated by their equity or whatever. Like, no, they're motivated that they get to work with you. Like, that's why they're here, and that's why they're excited. So there's a lot of benefits to this exercise besides developing a value proposition that can help you market yourself, to the talent on the market that value proposition resonates with.
Totally. I mean, the other piece too is like by you doing this work, you're essentially like holding up a mirror for the org and showing it to the founder and saying like, well, this is what we're doing right here. Right. And there's a level, I think, of like trust you probably gain with the founder in doing this exercise on like, wow, holy shit, I didn't realize that. Now I do. Maybe it takes a couple days or a couple weeks to like really kind of like solidify the thing. But I'm assuming you gain a significant amount of trust with that person doing this exercise too. Yeah.
Selfishly, like yes, like it helps build trust, because like you said earlier, the worst thing any new leader could do when they're coming into an organization is bring their playbook and slap it down on the table and be like, we did this at Amazon, or this is how we did it at DoorDash or whatever, and like this is why it's going to work here. Organ rejection is so real, as you know, and that's the fastest way to get there.
Yeah, and it's like also it's like the easiest way to fail very early is like coming with your playbook. Okay. So once you do this, right, we align on essentially like what our value proposition is for top talent. Then what are you doing with that information, and how are you using to then go hook like the best people?
So that's where the partnership with marketing comes into play. If you are in talent acquisition and you do not have a great relationship with your marketing organization, and I'm not talking about your CMO, I'm talking about everybody there. Go take them to lunch right now, right? Like set up like a virtual coffee. Like y'all should be best friends, because marketing and talent should just be hand in hand, like in all things, because it's one brand, right? There's an employer brand, of course, and there's a commercial brand, but it's one brand, and they both influence the sentiment from investors and customers, and of course, like employees. If you have a terrible employer brand, people go to your Glassdoor page or Comparably or whatever, and your ratings suck, and they're considering buying your product, there's probably going to be some hesitation there. So there's mutual investment from the two groups. But we market the hell out of our employer brand. It's in every job description. We put it up at the top. Like, this is what you can expect. So actually, like our tagline is, as a member of the ShipBob team, you will. And then it has the 3 points of our employer value proposition. And we continuously like measure this because it feeds into the employee experience. Because the last thing we ever want is to put something out there that's not true. So as we think about, the onboarding experience and the check-ins that we do with our new hires after the first week, after the first 30 days, after the first 90 days, after the first year, we're continuously assessing to make sure that this is real. And we don't get it right 100% of the time. You can't control everyone's employee experience, of course. But putting in our job descriptions, obviously all the social media content out there, socializing this with leaders that, hey, this is what we should be talking about in our interviews, because you can't just have talent partners or coordinators telling the story of who we are and who we aren't. They have to hear candidates have to hear a consistent message from all the interviewers and hiring managers that they meet with as well.
It's super interesting. And so, okay, so we have it basically woven into like JDs. I'm assuming you're also weaving it into like outbound messaging as well.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah.
So any prospecting messaging as well.
Okay. What is the ShipBob employer value proposition?
First line, grow with an ownership mindset. Our business is very, very hard. It's so hard, man. Like, so I was joking about the bags and the wrinkles earlier. Like supply chain, if you have been following the news since COVID, is unbelievable. And you have to have this like deep dedication and ownership mindset to be successful in this type of environment because we're resource constrained. You have to think like an owner. You have to think about our merchants that are putting their trust in us, and like we have the ability to make their dreams a reality. So it is absolutely required, and we see that from our highest performers of the company that they're truly invested in the mission. Of course, the second one, which I touched on earlier, is collaborate with peers and leaders alike. Our people love how flat our organization is. It's, we have a hierarchy, we have job architecture, of course, we have levels and all of these things, but this is very much the type of environment where, for better or for worse, at times, we have open, honest, transparent communication at all levels. Our founders participate in coffee chats. They're regularly going to community meetings. They always want employees at all levels to reach out to them on Teams or email. They're constantly seeking feedback. They're eager for it. And our founders, like setting that tone, sets the tone for the rest of the leadership team to be fully accessible. And our employees love that about our culture. And the third one is experience a high performance culture and a clear purpose. Dude, we are wild about goals here. Think about like, OKRs, goal setting cycles, goal accountability. I'm not paid by Lattice, but we use Lattice as our tool for everything organizational effectiveness and manager effectiveness and goal accountability. We have KPIs that we track and report on across the company every quarter about the activity in the system around keeping goals updated, making sure that they're relevant, making sure they are transparent so people can go in and see my goals, see other people's goals. And we found that that kind of like high performance, transparent environment is resonating as well with our high performers.
Okay. So then, you have this information, you weave it in at the top of the funnel. I'm assuming then you also weave it in as part of how you assess candidates.
If you're interviewing for, any sort of management leadership position, yes. Developing high performing teams is a core competency that every candidate is vetted for throughout the process. Like, how do you ensure that you are leading a high performing team, building a high performing team, keeping yourself and your team accountable? And then, of course, like, when have you failed doing that as well? So that's another big part that we're assessing for, is the failure piece. So one of our core values, which is obviously different than a core competency, is humility. We believe in failure. You got to fail. Like, absolutely. I've failed billions of times, it feels like sometimes, but that's the only way that we learn and get better. And so that's what we look for people as well. Look for in people as well, is how have they failed? How have they learned from it? And are they humble enough to own it and share that with us, especially like in an interview setting.
Yeah. Okay. So when we did our prep call, the thing that kind of blew me away was after the interviews, to when this person becomes an employee. And I think at most companies, there's this like delineation between, recruiting kind of just owns like the candidate thing. And then when they become employees, they go, okay, someone else's problem. Like I'm still focused on the candidate thing. And people have called this quality of hire, right? I think it's like the white whale. That's, for the 15 years I've been doing this, like no one's been able to actually like nail it. But you guys actually have a unique approach to quality of hire. Can you explain that to the audience?
Yeah. Quality of hire is the white whale. And I have lost sleep trying to solve that. And I was like, I'm not smart enough to solve this. Like no one else, there's, thousands of people in this field smarter than me and they haven't solved it. So who the hell do I think I am? So we try to do something super simple. The first point I do want to make though is like, I haven't had to hire a recruiter in 2 years. We've got a fully staffed team. It's an amazing talent acquisition team. But I remember when interviewing recruiters, and people we would talk to were always talking about how many people they could hire. I could hire 40 engineers in a quarter, or if it's a management position, like my team hired 500 engineers in 2022. And if I asked the question, how many of those engineers were still employed after 12 months? Like how many of them are on the path to promotion? How many of them made it to 6 weeks? Nobody could answer that question. And that really bothered me. Like how it doesn't end, right? Like talent acquisition, it doesn't end when they're hired. Like
no, that's like the first 2 seconds of it, right? Like this is like a lifetime of work that you're supposed to have with this person, and no one's thinking about like after the start date.
Exactly. So talent acquisition needs to think about not the quantity, and it sounds cliche, but not the quantity of the hires that a person or a team can make, but of course, like the quality. Like, are these people actually thriving in the organization? So that was the genesis of trying to think through this, of like, how can we pull the thread through to continue to get better and smarter when it comes to hiring? And another point that we made in a principle in all of our trainings that we give in the organization is really doubling down on the truth that every decision we make when it comes to hiring somebody has a huge impact on that person's life. And if we get it wrong, and we do, everybody gets it wrong. Nobody bats 1,000. If we get it wrong, that's on us. We're the ones that extended the offer. We're the ones that were convincing them to take it. And if the match wasn't right, that's 100% our fault. And now that person has to go and tell their family or their friends or whoever about this job that they were so excited about where it didn't work out. So there is a ton of gravity, as we all know, on the decisions we make in TA. So in order to get better at this, the system we put into place was, again, one question. You can tell most of my stuff is like 1 or 2 questions, right? So, trying to keep it simple. So 75 to 90 days after a person is hired. So Nolan, say you hire me, and I started in February. I go to you, Nolan, and ask the simple question: hey, Nolan, you hired Andy in February. If you had a time machine and you can go back to February and make the decision again, would you still hire Andy, or would you decide to keep looking? There's no wrong answer. It's a yes or a no. Like one of those answers is going to lead to like other conversations, but that's it. And we document that, the yes or the no's. We report on it to the founders every month. It's one of our core KPIs as a talent team that we report on. And right now we're running about 90% success rate. Obviously want that to get higher, but we found that this exercise, this super simple exercise, does a couple of things. One, Nolan, when you say, oh my God, like Andy's the best hire I've ever made. Like, thank God he's here. He's, 10x the team. Don't know what we would do without him. That gives me, the head of talent, the opportunity to reach out to that person and say, hey, like, I heard you're crushing it. Like, I've heard you're doing a great job. Do you have any feedback for me? Like, how could we have made your experience better? It sounds like you're doing awesome. That gives them recognition and appreciation and know that they're seen. And if the answer is no, I wouldn't go back and hire Andy again. That also gives us the opportunity to catch smoke before it becomes a fire. So let's say there's just something wrong. I'm not picking up on the trainings. I'm not integrating with the team. It's an opportunity to bring in the HR team and see what sort of interventions we can do to get ahead of it before it gets to a point where either the person leaves or they need to be exited. It's just that concept of, seeing smoke before it becomes a fire. And then, of course, sometimes like the right decision is to part pass, but it's a simple exercise with just tremendous impact from my view.
So one of the classic responses from HR about why they don't like to do this is because now it's a colleague to the recruiting team. And we don't want to like share private information about colleagues with other colleagues, right? And so I'm assuming with this information that you're gathering, you're actually sharing it back to your recruiting team so they can have a tighter feedback loop and can apply it in their work. Is that right? Yeah. And so like, because I always thought like, well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, like the recruiting team has to understand who's performing. Like if they don't, yeah. And so I feel like that line actually like doesn't hold water anymore, because if the recruiting team doesn't know what's going on with performance of the employees, then how can they possibly create a feedback loop to where we're actually like putting better employees into the seat?
Yeah.
And so okay, so you do this feedback loop with the recruiting team, and I'm assuming what's happening there is like you ask this question, you're getting stuff, and then there's probably like second order questions that actually yield even more data that you're then putting back into the process. Is that right?
Absolutely. So again, the whole purpose of it when we get it right and when we get it wrong in regards to the hiring decision is to go back and look at the data. We are religious about scorecards. Like when you think about, or if you looked at the KPIs that we use to track within the talent team, as well as just hiring for the company as a whole, a lot of it is weighted on scorecard timeliness and scorecard quality as well. Quality is a tough one because it's subjective, but as an organization, we don't approve an offer without high quality feedback. We have a 24-hour SLA for when feedback has to be submitted after an interview. And we've been doing this now about 2.5 years, having this up and running, which means we have unbelievable data. So when we do get a hire wrong, we're able to go back and like, let's look at what we missed. And 9 times out of 10, if we do make the wrong hiring decision and we go back and look at the documentation from the interview, we're like, oh shit, yep, there it is.
So it comes up in the act. Okay, so you're actually, that's really interesting. So there's like some semblance of it in the interview process, and then what does it look like at a macro level when you're looking at this data as to like why we're moving forward with these candidates? Is it because there's time pressure? Is it because we have a weak candidate pool? Like, why are we extending the offer then?
That's exactly the conversation that it opens up. Like, what we saw this, like it was there and we made the decision. And to your point, 9 times out of 10, it is this pressure to hire. This like we need a butt in the seat. And that is could potentially be catastrophic to teams, to an organization having the button seat mentality versus it is better to take longer to make sure we have the right button, the right seat for the right reasons.
What's so interesting about that actually having data around it though is like it's one thing to say that in theory and people actually like I think intrinsically get it, which is it's better to have an open seat than someone in the wrong seat. But until you like experience it and you feel it, like it's still a theory, right? And so what you guys were able to do is say like actually macro level, like, cause this is the way I would see it playing out. We're now in a debrief, right? And we're going through all the feedback and we see a bunch of like yellow, potentially red flags. And someone, either you or someone on your team can be like, guys, I actually think we should wait on this. And the hiring manager's like, I don't know. I feel like we should take, and it's like, well, of all the people who we've missed on, right, of who we've terminated, 90% of them have been because like of this reason. That's actually, I think that's where the powerfulness of the data comes into play. And it essentially turns into this like you're able to leverage it in a way that it's like the more data you have over time, the more it's leveraged in these conversations with hiring teams.
Exactly. And to your point, like when you first start doing this, you're not going to have the data.
Yeah.
And if you implement these types of practices, and I strongly encourage that everybody does, people are you've got to get buy-in from your stakeholders, because you're asking them to do essentially quote unquote more work. But to your point, the longer you do this and the more data you collect and the more success you see, you see the light bulbs just start going off, like, oh shit, like that's why we are asked to document feedback. And like, you're right, like looking at the data, we missed these 3 hires for these same 3 reasons. I don't want to do that again. Like now I'm in trouble with my boss because I keep hiring into this role and then the person leaves or we have to exit them within the first 6 months. How can I get better? And like, we have the data to help prevent those mistakes from happening in the future.
Totally. How do you make the hiring manager feel safe with that question, right? Because if I'm a hiring manager, and say it's kind of going mid, right? It's like, it's like, I'm not blown away for sure. I have doubts in my mind. And, I get this question from Andy and his team. And I'm looking at it and being like, fuck, like if I answer this thing and I say like, I would probably like go open the rec again. Like, and here comes like the HR cavalry coming in to like, like, how do you think about that? Because that's a real thing too, is like, I can just like, I don't want to like deal with this right now.
I'm laughing because you're saying quotes that I've heard. Like I have, we started doing this in January of 2024. So we're almost about a year and a half of doing this exercise. And I remember in those early days, I was like, well, I don't want to get in trouble with Andy. And so obviously, like as an individual, you have to, build that trust and relationship with people. And I'd actually be curious to get your take on this, because I've always had this hesitation around manager effectiveness metrics that track, I guess, failed hiring. I know a lot of companies out there do it. They're like, hey, Nolan, you've hired 5 people, 2 didn't work out. That's going to impact your performance bonus, because you've made some poor hiring decisions. So what are you going to do then? You're going to be like, well, fuck, I'm not going to fire anybody.
I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, I'm just going to deal with that.
Yeah, I don't want my bonus to be impacted. I'm just going to pray that it works itself out and, get to the 12-month mark or whatever. So one is making sure we're not like measuring this in a way that is affecting somebody's performance, making sure that we're continuously communicating. This is all about just an effort for us to get better. So I think I said this earlier, when I reach out to these hiring managers, I make sure they know, like, there's no right or wrong answer here. It's just, this is something for us all to learn. And if we got it wrong, we could try and fix it and we can learn together, because the talent team worked with you on this. You were the hiring manager, you were the decision maker, but we're all one team and we want to prevent this from happening in the future. And if we got it right and this person's crushing it, like, holy hell, how do we replicate that? What can we learn from the interview process and the relationship that we have with you that we could take to maybe some other departments where maybe the relationship isn't as strong?
Yeah, Tony at DoorDash used to say, specifically with exec recruiting, the Michael Jordan of exec recruiting gets it right 2 out of 3 times. Like the best in the world does it at that level. And he would say it to everybody, because what he was really doing was this like Jedi mind trick of creating psychological safety, that if he misses, everybody's going to miss, right? It's just like, we don't want to, right? We're putting in systems in place to ensure that like our hit rate gets higher. But at the end of the day, it will never be perfect. As long as we're still like, as long as AI is not doing all of our jobs and we're not hiring robots, we're still humans at the end of the day, right? And so you're going to miss, but the whole idea is that your hit rate gets higher over time. And by the way, I actually think like he did a really good job of rewarding hiring managers who would move to expeditiously fix the mistake.
Yep.
Right? Because like that's I actually think where the rewards are, is like, it's one thing to miss and say like, oh my God, like you should be better at this. Like that's not really helpful. Like I'm not incentivized to do that. It's another thing to be like, you're going to miss, you're a human, and fix it. And if you fix it fast, right, we will herald that behavior, and there won't be any like punitive measures for you.
Yeah, I love that approach of setting the tone that no one's perfect and no one ever will be. Even AI won't be perfect at this, right? There's no way. We have found that in these people know these check-ins are coming at this point, and when I am checking in with somebody and it's not going well, leaders now or hiring managers now, every time I feel like are already proactively doing something about it because they know this like check-in is coming to see how the new hire is doing and will we hire them again. And it's like, Andy, no, like I wouldn't at this point, but I'm already working with, my HR business partner, or I'm already working with somebody else to see if we can fix this. I'm like,
I love that.
hell yes. I'm like, that's awesome.
It's working. That means it's working. Yeah, totally. Okay. So, talk to me a little bit more about your role specifically, like in the interview process. Like, are you reviewing interview notes, scorecards, like justifications for hiring? Like, how do you get involved on day-to-day hiring inside of ShipBob?
So, all right, you're touching on a sore subject here because this is when the whole comment of I don't want to get in trouble with Andy, which I think people say in jest because they say it to my face, which I appreciate all the time. So we run a tight business. We've minimal opportunities for making bad investments, but they're going to happen. And if we do make a bad investment, we got to fix it quickly, of course. I am reviewing all the offer packets that come in, and so are our founders. Which, to be honest, I had conflicting feelings about, but in a conversation with our founders in 2024, we decided that this was going to be the best course of action for the immediate term. For a couple of reasons. One was we were finding that we were really good at interviewing candidates for skills. We were really good at saying like, all right, this person is like excellent at Python. This person is an Excel wizard, or, they're a great salesperson or whatever. We were completely missing in a lot of areas the other half of the coin, which is, can this person thrive in our unique environment? Like what I was talking about sooner. Do they might have all the skills? Do the behaviors and their competencies like align with who we are as an organization? So we've made behavioral competencies part of every single interview plan, where our behavioral competencies are our values, our company values in action, and we're assessing every single candidate for those. And so when we get the offer packets in, we're not reviewing comp, right? Like why is this person getting, $5,000 more than this other candidate that we recently hired? It's not anything about that. It's to help us build the muscle of making sure that we are covering skills, we're covering behaviors, we're covering motivations to get that decision right. Never 100% of the time, but better than 90% of the time. So we are reviewing those.
Yep. And so the chat, so I've done that in the past too. And what I found when I did it without founder involvement is essentially you become like the hiring police, like the hiring Gestapo. And the problem with that is then it's like, everything becomes you are the blocker, right? You're slowing down the business, or like you're putting in all this stuff, versus when the founders are involved, it's actually like, well, this is the bar we're setting for the entire company. And, me plus the founders is how we set it. I'm assuming like that's been the case for you guys too, which is like their involvement has actually probably helped the organization understand why it matters and why our bar is where it is.
100%. And that was one of the mistakes that I made early on, was like, hey, I'm the head of talent. Like, I'll be the bar sitter. Like, I got this. Y'all have plenty of other things going on. And that was completely the wrong thing to do. It's their company. Again, it's their vision. So their involvement very quickly set the bar across the executive team, which cascades throughout the rest of the organization. So in hindsight, I wish we had done it, the three of us, every time, instead of me trying to do it on my own.
Yeah, you spend a lot of political capital, actually, is what my experience was trying to do it by myself too. And then on this note, so like right now, I'm thinking a lot about company construction. We're filming this in May of 2025, and there was just an article in the Wall Street Journal that's saying like tech companies are leaving jobs open now, and backfills are not a guarantee anymore. I talked to a friend yesterday at a very large public company that most people know that's saying like, yeah, actually, like backfills have incredible amounts of scrutiny on them.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys doing something similar right now?
Very much so. And this has been another learning curve for the organization, but we're seeing a lot of buy-in as to the why it's necessary. So we did used to operate on, hey, Nolan left, go backfill the role that Nolan was in. Default every time. We have found that as the organization, like any scaling organization, it is a killer if you just assume that you should continue doing what you've been doing. You're not going to scale. You're not going to innovate. Every backfill creates a gap, of course, which creates pain, but it also creates opportunity. Is there an opportunity for you to rethink your operating model as a team? Is there an opportunity to rethink your organizational design? Is it, like right now, the big conversation, is there an operate to incorporate more AI solutions into this type of work? And then, of course, which is super important for us, is there an opportunity to elevate or move internal talent into this type of role that has the basic skills and the aspirations? So we actually have a KPI at ShipBob that we track with around internal mobility. So our goal is for 15% of our open positions to be filled with internal talent. We're well ahead of that right now, which is great. But I'll get back to you at the end of the year to see how we finish up. But so yeah, every backfill has to go through an approval process, which goes through the founders and I, and it has to have a very strong justification as to why the right thing is to backfill this position. What part of the roadmap is at risk? What have you thought about in regards to rethinking your org design or automating some things? And just that little bit of rigor, and it's a little bit of pain and a little bit of tension because people had never been asked to do that before, 9 months ago. It helps people think. Maybe there is an opportunity that, yeah, right? Like stupid, right? Or silly, right?
It's true though. It's like just a little bit of like because maybe the backfill does get approved, right? But just like having like essentially like a block that says like justify it. And also, oh, by the way, the people who are going to review the justification are the founders and the head of talent and potentially like the CFO as well, which is what I've seen a bunch of other companies doing. That just layer of thinking all of a sudden can be like, actually, like, we don't need this person, or I'd prefer to do this thing with my org, which maybe it still is a backfill, but maybe it's for a more junior role. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
As opposed to just kind of like, yeah, like, well, Andy left and now I'm going to fill in somebody with his seniority. To your point, I love the idea of putting a number on internal mobility because it's so easy to get hooked on the recruiting drug, right? It's like Andy left, like, let's go, like, inject that recruiting drug into me and go get more senior talent. When meanwhile, you already have people who have all the relationships built internally. They have all of the company knowledge. And so it's a way actually to invest into them, which is investing into the company.
Exactly. And that feeds back into who you want to be as an employer. And if you want to be an employer that enables people to do the best work of their career and thrive and hopefully stay for a long time and expand and put themselves in a position to write their ticket to do whatever it is they want to do next, you have to think like that.
Totally. Andy, where can people find you?
I am super easy to find on LinkedIn. Don't look for me on X or anywhere else. I try to stay away, but very easy to find on LinkedIn.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for the time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Nolan. This is great.